This is Chapter 5, the 18th Century World, 1700 to 1775, which is right before the American Revolution. Between 1700 and 1750, the population of the American colonies are going to grow dramatically, from 250,000 to over 1 million. So the increase is going to be from three main sources: natural growth, immigration, and forced labor. A major factor in natural increase was the lower age of marriage among colonial women, who typically are going to marry in their late teens, and they're going to have larger families, often bearing 7 to 8 children, most who did survive to adulthood. You have enslaved African women also beginning to have children in their teens, bearing similar numbers, though 25 to 50% of enslaved infants died due to the harsh conditions. But by the mid-18th century, the population growth of enslaved individuals was increasingly driven by natural reproduction rather than importation of enslaved people. You also have immigration playing a major role, especially from Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and Germany. The Scot-Irish are fleeing famine and religious persecution. They're going to form the largest immigrant group. Though often rejected in New England, they're going to settle in the middle colonies and the South, expanding westward into Native American lands, which of course will be an issue. Germans, including Lutherans, Catholics, and Quakers, Amish, are going to settle in the backcountry from Pennsylvania to the Carolinas, building very prosperous farming communities. You have the enslaved African population in the mainland colonies. They're going to experience excessive growth from 2,920 in the 1660s to over 300,000 by the eve of the American Revolution. So this surge was largely driven by the transatlantic slave trade, which of course was a very profitable and well organized part of the global economy. Enslaved labor is the huge portion of the global economy. The southern colonies are going to see the fastest growth with enslaved Africans. They're going to create nearly 40% of the population growth before the Revolution. By the time Congress bans the importation of slaves in 1808, you still had close to 500,000 African slaves, enslaved people that had been brought to the United States. Many are going to migrate to colonies that were not free. You still have indentured servants. You have convicts who are sold into labor, usually Georgia. So this mix of free and unfree migration is going to create an even more diverse population. It's going to build the labor force needed for the colonies to expand their economic systems. The demographic transformation of the colonies is going to lay both a foundation for economic development and cultural diversity. And so this is where we are on the eve, really, of the American Revolution. So during the 18th century, the American colonies have transformed into capitalist societies. They've got, like I've told you, a deep connection to the Atlantic slave trade. They have to have the enslaved labor to create the profit that they're creating. So this shift is driven by two major economic revolutions that are going to change how the colonists live and work. The first one is the consumer revolution, which is marked by this growing desire for goods like clothing, furniture, books, and household items. These products were once considered a luxury. They're going to become more widely available, leading to ordinary people, not just the wealthy, to be able to participate in this culture of consumption. You also have that the colonists are going to start to care more about how they look and what they own. So remember, wealth was this big identity factor in England, it was who was a gentleman and who was not. So the colonists are starting to be more concerned with that, especially since these products are more available. So their purchases are going to express their status and their identity, much like what you have now. So at the same time, you have what's called the industrious revolution. This isn't the industrial, it's the industrious revolution. So what it is, it reshapes family life and work habits. So instead of just working to meet your basic needs for the family, they're going to begin to organize their time and their labor to not only produce goods that they could sell, such as food and crafts, but also money they could earn to buy the items they wanted. So you've gone from a need-based society to a what you want society. So this meant that people, especially women and children, are going to work longer and harder. And together, these two factors are going to encourage a strong economic growth that's supported by a rise in population and that's increasing naturally, and also enslaved labor. And this is going to be really the foundation for a market-driven society at this time in colonial America. All right, so colonial economic growth. So this industrious revolution, where we are seeing the colonists and families are going to produce individually for market. They want not just what they need, but they want what they want. Okay, so of course, women and children are going to be working more. You're going to have wealth generated through shipping and agriculture. 80% of the population works on farms or plantations. There's little technological innovation here. So the colonial income is shaped by these three defining factors: plentiful land, the persistent shortages of both labor and capital. So the family served as the core economic unit, with labor divided by gender. Men worked the land while women managed childcare and domestic responsibilities. But the Industrious Revolution transformed this structure. So as families began producing goods for market to sell, the shift led to an increased production driven largely by the intensified labor of women and children. They're going to work alongside each other harder than they ever worked before, and this is what's really going to fuel colonial growth. Now, where you had women who maybe the male who did the outside farming was sick or injured, the women would then do that outside farming. So women would do the man's role if they had to, but if it was opposite, if the woman was injured, the man would not do the inside housework or the raising of the children. It did not flow that way in gender roles. All right, so with all of this economic expansion and the abundance of natural resources, you are going to have to where humans are controlling their destiny more. They're able to control and use their resources how they want to create more prosperous lives that they're wanting to live. We've already touched on mercantilism, the British mercantilism system, but this again is how it works. Remember that before the American Revolution, the British, England, whoever, still controlled that colony. We're going to use England as our example. We already talked about it. So you want a table, the wood in your yard, the trees, you have to chop those down, ship them to England because they are England's trees. England makes your table, and then England has the consumer to buy the table, which is you. So they control the resources, the means of making the table, and then they control the market, who they sell the table back to. This is going to be another issue with the American Revolution. And this goes with everything. It goes with tobacco. It goes with the wheat. It goes with the sugar. It goes with all the products you need. You're growing and working, but they are not your land or your stuff. So you have to send whatever you want made to England, and England will then sell it back to you. Okay, so we're going to look at a little bit difference in life. You have cities that are going to be located at ports, okay, or you're going to have fur trade hubs. You're going to have cities developed in distinct social hierarchies. You're going to have your elite class, you're going to have your merchants, your professionals, and your government offices, and then your religious leaders. You're going to have populations growing of poor laborers. You're going to have enslaved labor, rise in poverty, almshouses, which are like workhouses. So, like if you were homeless or destitute, you could work nonstop just for bare shelter and, food and water, just a little. So you have these different divisions already in urban life. Urban is city, rural is country. So think urban city, rural farm. So in your urban areas, you have your different social classes. You're going to have taverns, theaters, religious revivals. Are going to bring all people together, no matter what their social status is. You're going to have newspapers for your information. This is going to uh, create this public sphere of ideas circulating beyond just a few and into different layers in the city. You do have some common interest. So you do have some unity amongst all of the people, no matter the classes. But then you also have your very set upper and lower and poor classes and what those people can do. Your rural society is going to be your farmland. Most people eventually, as we get into technological advancements and machinery used on farms, you will then not be needed, all the workers. So these people will then move into the city for work. So you have the same type of division. Okay, you're going to have your wealthy farmers with your huge plantations and, your smaller farmers. You're going to have in the South, the rural economy is deeply dependent on enslaved labor. Um, you're going to have your wealthiest slaveholders are going to sell their crops, such as tobacco and rice, and your wealth is going to be determined on how many enslaved people you have. They have more access to an international market, so they're going to have more luxurious goods. Um, you are also going to have your indentured servants. You're going to have other colonies who are going to adopt different models of labor, which are going to rely very heavily on enslaved labor. All right, so the world slavery made. So the introduction of slavery in American colonies was not accidental. It was a very purposeful decision made to support the economic growth and the expansion of the colonial power. We already talked about this. The economy was based on the demand for enslaved labor. So, Georgia, which originally was founded with different goals, in 1732, Great Britain issued a charter that led to this new colony. And it banned both liquor and slavery, hoping to create a society based on hard work and moral values, uh, not on enslaved labor. But without the liquor trade, the Native Americans, and without enslaved labor to work the land, Georgia struggled economically to even survive. Farming was difficult. The colony failed to thrive, and eventually the trustees of the charter returned it to the control of the British Crown. And at that point, decision was made to transform Georgia into a plantation-based economy, like all the other southern neighbors that were plantation-based. So they're based on enslaved labor, and that's what was prospering at the time. So across the colony, slavery became the foundation for wealth and growth, especially in the southern colonies or colonies that relied on agriculture and trade. So it was very purposeful, creating a world that was built on, you know, exploitation, inequality, and this racial division. Okay, the Stono Rebellion is one of the largest slave uprisings in the American colonies. It's going to take place in South Carolina in 1739. So it begins with 20 enslaved Americans. They're going to break into a store and they're going to steal weapons and ammunition, and they're going to kill the storekeepers. So they're armed and they're determined, and they're going to march towards Spanish Florida, hoping that they will find freedom in Spanish Florida. So along the way, they're going to kill white colonists and they're going to recruit other enslaved people to join their cause. So the rebellion grew quickly, but by evening, colonial forces caught up with the group. Many of the rebels were executed on the spot, and this uprising was violently suppressed. However, the uprising that this could happen, that the enslaved people could uprise against them and kill them, terrifies the slaveholders, and they're going to change laws to create stricter, more controlling laws to keep enslaved people limited in movement, limited in education, no large gatherings. And so they're going to really, sounds rather stupid, but they're going to really create more restriction, if there wasn't already enough restriction, in slavery. And it's going to become a very powerful symbol of the fight for freedom from the enslaved people. All right, so we have two very large movements, the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening. So you need to try and keep these separate in your head. So both of these are considered transatlantic movements. Transatlantic because you have Europe, you have the Atlantic Ocean, and you have the Americas. So these ideas are being transferred over the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas through word of mouth, through pamphlets, through newspapers, and people coming over are talking about what's going on over there. So the idea is that you have the monarchy, the king and the queen. That is first. And underneath the monarchy, you have all the people. And the people serve the king and queen. So whatever the king and queen say, that's the rule, whatever they want to do to you. So John Locke, he's called an Enlightenment thinker. His social contract theory is called the state of nature, and the state of nature is that people are good. People do not need to be ruled. People can self-rule. And just because you are born, you have the natural right to life and liberty and property. Now, this argument of the state of nature because you are born with natural rights to life and liberty and property, that is going to come up all the way into the Civil War as to who are we actually talking about. Are we talking about just the white man? Are we talking about the black man? Are we talking about women? So his state of nature and natural rights will continue on through a lot of our history. John Locke is also going to be the one who is going to have the foundations for our Constitution, Declaration of Independence. Okay, so let's talk about John Locke. So he believes that the government did not come first and then people. People came first, and then they created the government and the government structures. Therefore, people are above the government. So people aren't to serve the government should serve the people. The people are first and then the government. This flips the monarchy, right? Because king and queen and then the people. So this idea flips the monarchy. So you can see how this is going to work well for the American Revolution and makes a lot of sense. So what it is that the government's job is to protect the rights of the people. Okay? And if the government does not protect the people's natural rights, their right to life, their right to liberty, and their right to property, and whatever other rights we have, like we eventually have the Bill of Rights, then it is the right of the people to revolt against the government. And that's what they'll use for the American Revolution. The government is not protecting our rights, they're not giving us rights, so we will now revolt. Okay, so that is Enlightenment. The Great Awakening is also called a transatlantic movement, but it will be religious, whereas the Enlightenment is intellectual. So, what the Great Awakening is, you're going to have, it's going to come all through the colonies, and what it is, it's going to be this emphasis that all people, bringing everybody together, no matter how poor you are, how rich you are, we are all born sinners. And we all need salvation, and we are all equal in the eyes of God. So you have this society that you have, of course, enslaved people, you have indentured servants, you have the poor, you have the wealthy, and all of everything is always justified through religion, as it always has been. But you have this revival, these big revivals, like a big, huge church service, change in the way people are thinking. So you have this idea that what, us, the poor, or the indentured servants, were actually equal to the wealthy. So you have these very rebellious young church leaders in 1734 and 1735. Jonathan Edwards is one of the most famous. He's a young, passionate minister who is now not telling you hell and damnation and follow, what this person says, that person is telling you that everybody's equal. And everybody has the same access to God, and everybody has the same spiritual abilities. So you have John Edwards come along and spark this, and they're going to these colonies, and they're having these meetings outside under tents, because all these people are coming to hear what they're saying, because they're saying we're equal now. We all are equal in the eyes of God. And then you have George Whitefield in 1739. He has these dramatic sermons that are going to draw thousands of people to come and hear these messages of human sinfulness and divine mercy to, like I said, all the audiences of different ages, different classes, different backgrounds, male, female, slave, enslaved, free, rich, poor. And that is what's going to be kind of the hook of it all, that it's a unity. So these messages, called the Great Awakening, they start to really resonate with different people, and they start going from colony to colony to colony. And he offers comfort while challenging materialism and competitiveness of the different colonial societies. But it urges the individual to seek transformation within themselves, not through all these different social structures, but that they can have these different things themselves. And that is kind of what really makes it unique, and what, of course, brings all these different people out to hear these words.